Alrighty then, how's it going, guys? And welcome to what is the video that was going to be the motovlog that I promised you. But this happened. It is pissing down with rain. So unfortunately, those plans have been dashed. But I thought instead I would use this opportunity to try out my new wireless lapel mic that I bought. Um, and to tell you guys the epic story of my brake calipers. I'm going to show you my. Now, those of you that have been subscribed to my channel for a while probably know from a while back that I had a bit of a problem where one of my brake calipers seized up, and I found myself in a position where I needed to get new ones. And the options were basically spend 3,000 ringgit or 3,500 ringgit on a stock set, or I would spend about 4,500 ringgit on a set of HEL calipers, right? And sorry, the rain's coming in sideways, so I was going to show you the other side, but I'm not going to because, I'm getting wet standing here at the moment. But the story didn't end there. If you guys can see, there is a piece of metal right here. Now that, my friends, is a custom machined bracket for my brakes so that I could install them. Now, why would I need that, you ask? Well, if you see these particular calipers when I bought them, I didn't bother to ask whether they were for a radial mount or an axial mount. And it turns out they are for the former. These are radial mount calipers, and the Z750 has axial mount calipers. So, bit of a problem there. So when I took the bike to my mechanic to have them set up, he called me up and he was like, yeah, I can't put these on your bike. So that sucked. And then I had to, the first thing I tried to do was see if I could get some HEL calipers that actually fit my bike. But the problem is that it turns out that these calipers may be legitimately sourced. Don't know for sure because I kind of got them through a friend of a friend of a friend. And there was no receipt. So, yeah, not 100% sure on the validity of that. But we'll never know. So, moving on. So, after much searching around and discussion, I ended up finding a guy who said that he could have these custom CNC brackets made up and install the brakes for me for an additional 800 ringgit, which sucks, right? And so, just checking, I'm gonna edit that one out later. So, yeah. So then I took my bike to this guy's shop, and I got to tell you, this was without a doubt one of the dodgiest shops I have ever seen in my entire life. Like, this was a shop which was in a little freaking shack underneath a bridge in a corner of Kale that I've never been to. And it just looked like the dodgiest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And I thought to myself, am I sure about this? Well, I can't get my money back for the brakes, and I'm certainly not spending another 3,500 ringgit and waiting 3 months for parts to come from Japan. So I decided to go ahead and do it. And it took 4.5 weeks. 4.5 weeks for this guy to, because it turns out he wasn't making the bracket himself. He was actually outsourcing these brackets somewhere else, and then he was going to install them. So, I was at this point. I'm just like, look, just get it done. I just want my bike. I want my bike back. So I had them. I had this guy do it, and 4.5 weeks later, I picked up my bike, and oh my god, it was mental. The setup of the brakes was so poorly done that they felt like trash. I just really didn't feel safe. So I took the bike back to my regular mechanic, and I asked him to pull everything apart and put it back together. Oh yeah, and thing I forgot to mention, right? When I sent my bike to this guy's shop, she was mint. She was perfect. There was nothing wrong with it. Now, right, when I pick the bike, there's a giant crack on my tacho. And of course, this guy's like, "Oh, I have no idea about that. It wasn't me." And bullshit, it wasn't you. I don't know who else it could have been. So anyway, took the bike to my mechanic. He pulled the brakes off and readjusted them. Mentioned to me about how dodgy the install was and how he had to do several things to make them fit properly. And then the next thing, which was interesting, was the initial guy that installed the brakes, also um, stole my side mirrors, which is really weird. Maybe didn't, probably, no, let's say not stole them, but threw them away, which is like, if you're going to change parts on somebody's bike, you give them the original parts back, right? You don't freaking throw them away. Those were good quality side mirrors, and yes, they wouldn't have fit on this bike after the install. As you can see, there is no mounting, because you got this 19 millimeter HEL master cylinder, right? And there's no mounting there. There's a mounting on this side, which has since been reconfigured for my phone holder, but there's no mounting on this side. So I had to get these horrible bar end mirrors, which I really don't like, but I've got to be able to see behind myself, so that's that. And of course the rear brake light didn't work because it's a racing caliper setup, so it's not designed for street use specifically. So it didn't have the wiring or the sensor for it to be able to activate the rear brake light. And I ended up having to buy a sensor, a pressure activated sensor, which Rain's lightened up enough now so you guys can see that here. Right, there it is. That's the guy there. He's attached to the top of the brake line. And then, so here comes phase 2 of the story of this install of my brakes. So when I finally got the sensor delivered, I took it to my normal mechanic and I asked him to set it to install it for me. And as he's doing it, turns out that the guy has the initial guy that installed the brakes on the bike cross-threaded the bolts in my damn near 5,000 ringgit calipers and almost ruined them. Yeah. Luckily for me, my mechanic is a fucking wizard and managed to re-tap the holes and install everything, and now she's working fine. Beautiful, no problem at all. Does need new brake discs. Haven't gotten around to that yet, but yeah, absolute nightmare. Absolute nightmare it was. Overall, it took about maybe 2.5 months, and it was significantly more expensive than I was expecting it to be. And yeah, so moral of the story was probably would have been better just to get some replacement Nissan calipers, and have kept everything the way it was. So now for part 2 of my story about shit that has been done to my bike by mechanics um, in Malaysia. So recently, well, not recently, about 6 months ago, as you typically do on any sort of motor vehicle, I had to change my tires. And so I went to this little shop in KL, which my friend has introduced me to. And the rule of this shop, which my friend told me, was tires, okay. Chain, okay. Small little things like an oil change, okay, no problem. You can take it to this guy, he'll do it. They're really fast, they're really cheap, but don't let them touch anything on the engine, right? Which I didn't. But when I was getting my tire changed, right, when the guy pulled off my wheel, he showed me that inside the wheel hub, there's these little rubber bushings, right? And the ones that were in the wheel hub were old, they were cracked and dry, and they needed replacing. So I said, I was like, shit, do you have any in stock? And the guy was like, yeah, I've got them in stock. I can replace them for you. And I was like, all right, great, no worries, let's do that then. And here I am thinking, it's rubber bushings, it's not touching my engine, it should be fine. So he replaces the bushings and everything's great. New tires, everything's going great. And, about maybe a month and a half ago, I start to get really worried because my bike is doing something really weird. It keeps like clunking and and rattling and just jerking and not being smooth like it used to be. So I think to myself, oh shit, that feels like it might be a clutch problem. So I take them out to my normal mechanic, ask him to have a look at the clutch, and he goes, no, clutch is fine. So now I'm really shitting myself because if it's not the clutch, it must be the gearbox. So a couple of days later, I take my bike back to the guy, to my normal mechanic, and I said, look, I'm really petrified that my gearbox is going to blow up while I'm riding or something like that. It's going to be catastrophic damage. So we talk about it for a while, and then I mention something to him, and he goes, I know what it is. And he to my rear sprocket, and he pulls it up, and it moved about an inch. And I'm like, what the f-? And he's like, bushings are worn out. You're going to need to replace them. That's what's causing all of this feeling of jerkiness and everything. And I'm like, but no. I had those bushings replaced a couple of months ago. So he goes, well, let's take the wheel off and have a look. Right? So he takes the wheel off. Turns out that the bushings that the guy had put in there were too small. So you know what they did? They put double-sided foam tape on them. Double-sided fucking foam tape. So of course, after a few months of riding, the foam tape gets squished down and is no longer functioning to hold the bushings in place. So the bushings are not holding the sprocket properly, which is causing the feeling of jerkiness and roughness and all this other crap. So, moral of the story is that 9 out of 10 mechanics in Malaysia are going to rip you off. And yeah, I just feel lucky that at least I have one that is trustworthy. Um, so, but unfortunately, he doesn't do everything. Mainly the primary thing that this guy does, my main mechanic does, they do valve clearances and things like that. And, it's a very busy shop, so I don't always have the luxury of sending my bike there. So, yeah, that's pretty much the story of what happened in between my last video about my bike and now. I mean, now finally, thank God, everything's been sorted and she's running beautifully. Yeah, so don't worry, there will be a motovlog coming, just not today because it's, end of October into November, which is the rainy season here in Malaysia. So, I'm going to have to wait for a nice shiny day before I can go out. So, yeah, until next time, have a good one.